Hey everyone.
Hi,
It's so great to have you all here. My name is Ashley and I'm the dramaturg at Playwrights.
I'm Carl. I'm the Artistic Programs Manager.
And we just want to thank you so much for coming. We're so grateful for the opportunity to connect with you all during this time of social distancing. So even though we can't gather together right now, all of us at Playwrights are really committed to finding ways to continue our work in pursuit of our mission, which is to celebrate writers and their new plays and musicals. So this is the 5th year that we've offered perspectives on playwriting, POP for short. It was born out of a desire to offer our audiences and our artists a chance to connect in a new way and to explore the playmaking process a little more deeply. We love our audience very much, and we want to make sure that we're equipping them with the tools to engage with our work. So we're excited for the chance to continue this program this summer digitally, and to expand access to even more people in our extended community around the world. So everyone comes to this from a different vantage point. Some of you are probably artists, maybe writers or directors or actors looking for some inspiration to fuel your own practice. And other people might have very little or no experience as makers, which is great. Maybe you just really loved A Strange Loop, or you love seeing plays at Playwrights Horizons or elsewhere and are looking to gain some insight into how we do what we do. Or maybe you're just stuck at home and looking for a distraction, but all of it is good. If you're here, you belong, and we're so thrilled to include you.
Yes, thank you, Ashley. I'm just going to say a couple words about the order of events this evening. So we're going to turn things over to Michael in a moment, who is going to lead us through a program or lesson of sorts for about 30 minutes. And then Ashley and I will we'll disappear, but we'll be floating very nearby. And then once Michael gives us the signal at the end of his sort of prepared remarks, we'll reappear and we will facilitate a Q&A for another 30 minutes or so. And in Zoom, we'll be using the Q&A feature, which you're able to post questions there. All attendees in Zoom can see all the questions. You can post anonymously if you like. And you can also upvote questions that you really like, which will be really helpful for Ashley and me to figure out sort of what people are hungry to hear about. If you're on YouTube, you can type in the chat on the right side of the screen. And we'll have eyes there too, but also May Truhaft Ali, who is our literary fellow at Playwrights this season. She's in there, she's keeping tabs on things. She's sending us questions too. So whether you're in the Zoom or whether you're on YouTube, we got you covered and you'll be part of the conversation. What else did I want to say? Oh, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people here, so we probably won't be able to get to everything, but we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can in our time. And the other thing I should mention is that we're currently recording this in Zoom for potential wider release a little bit further down the road. So just keep that in the back of your minds as we go. I think we're gonna welcome Michael now. We might be having a little bit of a sound issue, so bear with us. It might take a second for us to connect the dots. But Michael, we're ready for you. Ta-da.
Yay. Hey, Michael, can you hear us? I think we can hear Michael.
Hello, you can hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
Wow, this is terrifying. All right. Should I just go ahead?
Yeah, we'll disappear. We'll
All
let you do your
right,
thing.
everyone. We're living in an immaterial world, a virtual immaterial world where you all can hear me, but I cannot hear you. So I'm gonna operate as though, yes, all right. I'm sorry, I'm like doing multiple things at once. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael R. Jackson, and this is my masterclass. I am very excited to do this. I have a glass of whiskey, Knobs Creek, which I sort of have discovered late in life that I will be using to guide me through this masterclass and to sort of talk about a couple of things that hopefully you will all find some value in. I wanted to sort of start by acknowledging that we're in a sort of scary, unpredictable time, and that has a different impact on everyone, myself included. And part of what I'm going to talk about with regards to playwriting has to do with some of that. What I thought is that I would sort of start this evening off by doing a cover. I'm a musical theater writer. If any of you are new to this podcast, I'm the writer of A Strange Loop, which is premiered at Playwrights Horizons in association with Page 73. And it's a musical about a Black gay musical theater writer who works as an usher at a Broadway show, who is writing a musical about Black gay musical theater writer who works as an usher at a Broadway show, who's writing a musical about a Black, so on and so on and so forth. It's a Strange Loop. And it's a musical that I wrote. I'll get into like where it came from, but I'm gonna start this evening off by sharing a cover of a song that it's my favorite song ever written. It's a song that my dad used to play a lot when I was a kid. And it's a song that's a love song, but I always heard it in a different way because there's sort of vaguely apocalyptic imagery within the song. And yet there's still a sense of optimism or of yearning for connection in it. And I always heard it in that way, as though because when I was a kid, I used to read like dystopian novels like The Stand or whatever, or Alas Babylon. And so I'm always really into like these dystopian nightmares. And this song to me always read as though it was a dystopian nightmare love song. And so I felt it was appropriate to sort of start by cleansing the palette for this masterclass by singing this song that I love so much, and then we'll go forward. When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, and the mountain should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me, oh, stand by me, oh, stand by me. stand by me, stand by me, darling, darling, stand by me, oh, stand by me, oh, stand now, stand by me, stand by me, when I lay in trouble, won't you stand by me, oh, stand by me, stand by me, stand by me, stand by me. And that's Stand By Me by Lieber and Stoller and Benny King. And it's a song that's always meant a lot to me. And I just, again, want to share that to sort of like cleanse the air, sort of just as a fresh beginning, and sort of tell you where I am in this age of like social distancing, when we can't actually sort of be together, this idea of like standing by each other when sort of the world is in chaos is like very moving to me. And so I just wanted to offer that to the virtual room. And so with that in mind, the sort of thing that's I felt would be a great organizing principle for this talk is, for those of you who are playwrights, for those of you who are not playwrights, I'm a writer who very much sort of thinks about life and theater as being mirrors to each other. And A Strange Loop was very much a piece that was an expression of that sort of dichotomy. And so I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about my process and how I sort of found my way into this sort of Hall of Mirrors piece, and sort of how I approach musical theater writing and playwriting in general. And hopefully that will be something that, you can take something from. And, something that a lot of writers don't necessarily talk about, but that I try to talk about, and that's like an important part of my process, is procrastination. I can't write anything without wasting many hours thinking about other things and sort of like getting my brain away from whatever it is that I'm writing and thinking about, or like away from like all the sort of craft sort of 101 issues and just into a sort of dream space. And for me, that just involves a lot of procrastination. And my procrastination tends to manifest in the form of YouTube and Instagram, like any sort of like looking at other sources and a lot of YouTube wormholes. And so I thought I would start, talking about that by sharing some of my favorite kinds of things to procrastinate looking at. So I'm going to share with you a funny clip of something that I think is amazing. I'm sharing my screen. And wait, no, I have to do something else before I do that. No, that's right. Hold on. Let me go. All right, now I'm sharing my screen. And I'm sharing a clip of any fans of Bravo's Real Housewives of Beverly Hills out there. I hope this pleases you. So Real Housewives of Beverly Hills is a stupid reality TV show on Bravo. And this is a clip from the show, but it's a clip of like a ridiculous thing that came from the show. You don't need to know what it's about, but someone did an ASMR like rendering of it, and I think it's like one of the most pleasurable things ever to watch, and I love watching it over and over again. So enjoy.
You want to bring up my stuff? Let's talk about your home cam. Excuse me, I'm not talking to you. You know what? Well, I'm talking to you. We've all talked about you. Shame on you. I'm not talking to you. And I'm talking to you. Shut your fucking mouth. I've had enough of you, you beast. Beast? Yeah. How dare you? How dare me? You came into my home and I apologized. No, you didn't in 3 years. Actually, you didn't. I don't like you. Guess what? I don't particularly like you either. Well, good. I can't find one damn thing to like about you right now. Well, good. I've never found one thing to like about you. I did nothing to your hair, to your face, to your attitude. What are you doing like that? It's pure evil. What is wrong with you? Kyle, shush up. You should have said right from the beginning. Not nice, Kim. In 3 years, I have been okay. I talked to her on the plane and you were like this. The fuck is that? You don't act like this, Kim. You want me to defend you even though you act like that? I'm not. I've never need you to defend me because you never have. Kim, yes, I have. She does defend you, Kim. She does defend you 1,000%. She defends me more than you do. Kathy would not ever act like this. Kathy would have my back like a real sister. You have been doing this to me for years. It's not okay to talk to your sister or anyone like that. You don't understand the relationship. No, I don't, but it's not okay to talk to anyone like that, Kim. It's just not okay. Your behavior's just not okay. Really? Yeah, it's not okay. Why don't you have a piece of bread and maybe you'll calm down a little? Shame on you. You're disgusting, Kim. Please. Can I interfere for 1 second? I understand your sensitivity because you've worked really hard for 3 years. My husband has only been sober. Let's talk about the husband. Excuse me, did you just say let's talk about the husband? Let's not talk about what you don't want out. You know what? Let me tell a scary, vicious human touch. Don't touch my husband ever. Just saying what don't you fucking ever. What you don't want out for everybody to know. Sit down, watch what you talk about me or everyone will know. You never go near my husband. Everybody will know. Fucking understand that. Everybody will know. After everybody will know what you don't want. Please don't go there. Don't you fucking go near my husband ever.
So I couldn't hear that because something's up on my end, but even just watching it brings me so much joy. Another clip I'm going to share with you is a sort of iconic queer, it's become queer over the years, but it's an iconic scene from a show I've been watching a lot during quarantine, is Designing Women, which is about four Atlanta designers in the 1980s, sort of these ballsy, crazy, different kind of women. It's sort of a lot of people compare it to Golden Girls, but I actually think of it as closer to Sex and the City. But it's about these four designers who are have crazy antics or whatever, and one of them, this woman Julia Sugarbaker, is like kind of a firebrand, you know, tell it like it is, broad. And anyway, there's a scene that I watch often that's of Julia Sugarbaker telling somebody off. And of course, now my computer is buffering, which is exciting. Let's try this again. Here we go.
Excuse me. Aren't you Marjorie Lee Winnick, the current Miss Georgia World?
Why, yes, I am.
I'm Julia Sugarbaker, Suzanne Sugarbaker's sister. I couldn't help overhearing part of your conversation.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here.
Yes, and I gather from your comments there are a couple of other things you don't know, Marjorie. For example, you probably didn't know that Suzanne was the contestant in Georgia pageant history to sweep every category except congeniality. And that is not something the women in my family aspire to anyway.
That's really
Or that when she walked down the runway in her swimsuit, 5 contestants quit on the spot. Or that when she emerged from the isolation booth to answer the question, what would you do to prevent war? She spoke so eloquently of patriotism, battlefields, and diamond tiaras. Grown men wept.
That's really...
And you probably didn't know, Marjorie, that Suzanne was not just any Miss Georgia. She was the Miss Georgia. She didn't twirl just a baton. That baton was on fire.
Look,
and when she threw that baton into the air, it flew higher, further, faster than any baton has ever flown before, hitting a transformer and showering the darkened arena with sparks.
Look.
And when it finally did come down, Marjorie, my sister caught that baton, and 12,000 people jumped to their feet for 16½ minutes of uninterrupted thunderous ovation as flames illuminated her tear-stained face. And that, Marjorie, just so you will know, and your children will someday know, is the night the lights went out in Georgia.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Well, now you do.
I find that to be utterly satisfying. And again, it's, you know, just sort of part of my procrastination. I'm now going to try something since I can't hear anything, just to see. No, I'm not going to do that. Never mind. Forgive me, friends. I'm having various technical difficulties on my end. I'm going to proceed forward. So I just shared those because, like, for me, again, procrastination is a big part of how I work, and I think it's actually really important. Where I think one tool that you can use in your toolbox when you're writing is to find those things like that just sort of free up your neurons a little bit in your mind, and like get you sort of jazzed up and excited, so that when you come back to whatever it is that you're working, you have sort of the energy to, like, you can take that energy and sort of redirect it into like your songwriting or your playwriting or whatever. I always find this to be a really useful thing. And, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, that I think that life and theater are sort of like reflections of each other. And, you know, to that end, I feel like another important aspect for me of playwriting and of the musical theater writing and songwriting and any kind of writing is really telling the truth. And I've been thinking a lot about what that means, because, you know, it's both as simple as that and more complicated than that. For me, telling the truth has to do with sort of interrogating my own impulses. And when writing A Strange Loop, that was like a really big part of the whole process. I mean, you know, and I began writing A Strange Loop when I was around 21 years old. It started off as a monologue that I wrote, just a thinly veiled personal monologue that I wrote for me to sort of like figure out for myself why I was like this young Black gay man who was so miserable, you know, because I felt like I didn't fit in. It was sort of a post-September 11th world. I was like graduating from college. I had this playwriting degree. I didn't know like what was coming or where I was going. And so I found myself going into this sort of deep place of introspection just to sort of understand what was going on with me. But like that process was also manifesting in this piece that I was writing that it forced me to have to sort of interrogate who I was and like who I thought I was and who I wanted to be. And I feel like that's applicable to, you know, most anything that anyone writes, because you're creating these characters who all have like a desire or a point of view that they're trying to share. And I feel like the strongest pieces are always the ones where you can truly see both sides of an argument. And in A Strange Loop, those arguments were like arguments I was having with myself. And so a lot of the writing of that piece had to do with me sort of identifying the things that I believed in, and then figuring out what was the sort of counter argument to that thing that I was believed in or was struggling with, and like having those two points of view duke it out. One really sort of I don't want to say obvious example, but one example of that is in the Tyler Perry sort of argument that happens within the musical. If you haven't seen the musical, Usher, the protagonist, is a musical theater writer trying to write this musical sort of about his own existence. But what he comes up against is that the people in his life, his mother, his Black sort of staunchly Christian, you know, mother, would like for him to write a gospel play, and so would his agent, so that a Tyler Perry style gospel play, and so would his agent, so that he can have some sort of success in the world, but also be a good Black representative artistically. And he doesn't care for Tyler Perry's work because he feels that Tyler Perry's work is not crafted well, and that it's actually sort of puts out harmful images into the universe. And so like I wrote a song called Tyler Perry Writes Real Life. And in that song, I had to put Usher as the position of like, Tyler Perry's work is really bad, and then put this sort of like iconic Black ancestors coming out of the grave to shame him for having a negative opinion of Tyler Perry's work, and like pushing him to actually write this gospel play that he doesn't want to write. And for me, that was like a really exciting discovery to make in the piece, because it wasn't just me like shitting all over Tyler Perry. It was like me / Usher having a point of view about an artistic point of view, and then having other voices counter that with their point of view that was just as strong. And like what you see on stage is this like really powerful interplay and sort of combustion of ideas. And I feel like I often see plays that it seems like they're very one-sided in their sort of points of view. And I really enjoy seeing the combustion of two ideas. So I sort of implore everyone out there who is a writer or a playwright to think about that when you're approaching your work. Are you just sort of doing a one-sided sort of demonstration of your, opinion of something in your work through your characters? Or are you actually allowing them to debate each other? Are you actually interrogating what your impulses are when you sit down to write something? So I encourage everybody to like really examine, what are your contradictions? What are the contradictions in the world that you've created? That's, for me, is always something I try to come back to. It really keeps things interesting when I can see two sides or three sides or four sides of an argument. What are the things that you're afraid to say? What are the things you're afraid to say in life? What are the things that you're afraid to say in your piece? One thing that I've discovered in the course of writing A Strange Loop, that was something that evolved over the many years that I wrote it, which is there's like a big thread in A Strange Loop, or one of the loops within A Strange Loop, is about Usher sort of seeking sexual and romantic satisfaction. And in the piece, he, as I did in my own life, had to come to a place after many years of struggling in New York City in the sort of dating, sex, grinder, jacked, Adam for Adam world or whatever, was coming to a place of actually realizing that I explicitly wanted to be romantically and sexually involved with Black men specifically. Because when I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and I actually grew up around lots of Black gay boys, and my first kisses and everything else were with Black boys. And then I came to New York, and then New York just felt like it was like white gay men central in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I had to reorient myself to white men for the most part. And I spent many years sort of torturing myself, frankly, by swimming through this sort of white gay male, the gatriarchy, as I like to call it. And I and Usher had to realize over time that like, we don't want to be with white men. And that like, there's actually is value in being with Black men. And that was something that I was afraid to say in my own life, because I felt like the culture was constantly putting out these subtly undermining messages that like two Black men being together or two Black women being together or whatever was somehow less than, and that like interracial relationships were a sign of progress and anything else was sort of taking a step back. And so I needed to, for me as a writer, I needed to express that in the character of Usher. And once I was able to do that, it was like putting that fear out there on stage and articulating it in a vulnerable way ended up being like a really important turning point in the kind of piece that it was, once I realized that that was, what I wanted to do, And then, like I think about that in other areas, again, in the piece and also in my life, which is that we're, currently in this moment of this virus sort of racing, all over the globe and sort of challenging all of these systemic issues that that are sort of have been pre-existing for so many years. And it's forcing, I think, everyone, and I feel like I'm looking at everyone sort of bumping up against the many contradictions in like how one should prioritize one's survival, how one should prioritize other people's survival, you know, and like, and I feel in a sense like I'm a character in like a kind of dystopian novel, as I mentioned at the beginning, that was, you know, why I sang Stand By Me. And like, and it's forced me to have to look at some like uncomfortable thoughts that like pop into my mind that I think that like also are the kind of thing that could be in a play or a musical that can force you as a writer to like grapple with the uncomfortable, the unsayable. And like one thing that like I sort of discovered about myself during this quarantine time and during, you know, all of the many messages that we get from our government or from our friends on social media or from our families or from some conspiracy theorists that you read on Facebook or whatever, is that like one thing that like I know that I feel afraid of myself, feel afraid of, is that like I think that wearing the masks are like bullshit, but I also think that I'm also afraid to not wear the mask. And that contradiction for me is something that I live with every day. So I wear the mask and every day I wear it and I fucking hate it. And I don't just hate it because I like it looks stupid or it makes me feel stupid. I could live with that. But there's something about how we're asked to wear these masks and we're also asked to sit in our apartments and pay the rent. And it's and like and that like we're living in this sort of system where like we're asked to like make these sort of quote unquote sacrifices to keep everyone safe, but then like the world, the sort of larger world outside of us is not asked to adjust accordingly. And so in my body, like I feel constant, you know, war of like wanting to be free, but also feeling like if I'm free, I'm going to like kill someone, or I'm going to kill myself if I don't do the right thing. And so I feel like if you can take the time in your life to sort of identify those kinds of contradictions within yourself, that you'll find that you can find that when you go to write something down, that there's a lot of rich material to mine. Like, you know, we all have like shadow sides to us and things that we don't like to admit. And I feel like now, especially, and the kind of theater that I'd like to see on whatever constitutes the other side of this, is the kinds of theater that really sort of sits with those uncomfortable truths within us, because I feel that we haven't in the American theater in recent years really sort of gone there and like talked about the contradictions of American identity and all the ways that that breaks down and the ways that that splinters and is in conflict with people that we might even love, people who are in our families. One thing, you know, bringing it back to A Strange Loop, I was in rehearsal for A Strange Loop for the first reading that we did at Playwrights Horizons on November 11th, 2016. So it was 4 days after Trump was elected. And I remember sitting in the room. I remember being grateful that I was in rehearsal that week and I had taken the week off from my then day job. And then being able to rehearse this like very Black queer musical, but then also doing it during this time when like our political landscape was changing in such a drastic way. And then going to talk to a neighbor of mine who expressed some enthusiasm for Trump being elected. And then me sort of having to like, and he was another Black gay man who was a neighbor in my building. And I remember having to like arguing with him and like actually sort of starting to understand some of where he was coming from, while at the same time being opposed to what he was saying. And that conversation ended up spinning out into a friendship with this person who has since sort of changed a lot of his views with regard to Trump. But the constant back and forth of us arguing opened up a whole new universe of thinking for me, because prior to Trump being elected, I was just sort of believing whatever Rachel Maddow told me was the absolute truth. So I just encourage people to like think about those kinds of things. And again, like the thing that I just find in myself and have found is that like I have this very rebellious spirit as a writer and a person, but I also have like a spirit of conformity in me as well, where like as rebellious as I am, when they tell me to wear the mask, I put it on, even though I don't really think it's like protecting me or anyone else from anything. And admitting that is like a very vulnerable thing for me. And I feel that we probably all have a lot of these kinds of vulnerable expressions within us that we actually sit down and talk about it and put it to paper or speak it to an existence with another person, but and not worry about like what the social media mob is going to say about our like vulnerable opinions and feelings. On that note, one thing I wanted to share, just to kind of put a pin in that, is another clip that's one I come to often that's a bit of procrastination for me.
She don't mean that. People say things they don't mean when they get mad. I ain't lonely. I got her, I got chicks, I've got this house, I've got chicks. But God, I'm so lonely. God, I'm so lonely. God. I'm a lonely old woman. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I'm a lonely, 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 lonely woman. I am a lonely old woman. Yeah, 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 yeah. Woo, woo, woo. I sat down here long enough and I realized ain't nobody calling me, nobody coming to see me. I'm lonely, but there's one thing I know in my sanctified spirit, that when I fall down on my knees, my Mr. Right wraps his arms around me, around me, around me, around me. Hold me, mold me, shape me, make me. Do it, Jesus. Do it, Jesus. Do it, Jesus. Woo! I don't want to eat by myself. Tired of cooking for myself. Don't even want to go to church by myself. I'm lonely. 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 Yes, I am.
And that was Lonely Old Woman, which I often feel like, especially since I'm a lonely old woman, because this guy that I thought I was seeing like totally ghosted me during this pandemic, which is another real thing, like to think about. Like, what is that? Like, people, like this pandemic is like, I feel is a real test of character, and it's sort of you know, it's like taking the mask off, which is what I'd like to do. I'd like to take the mask off. So think of that as a metaphor. And I think I'm getting sort of toward the end of my talk, but I just, you know, wanted to sort of say that the world is a scary place. And I am somebody who turns to writing in order to make myself feel strong. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I started writing A Strange Loop in the first place, was because I had all these questions and confusions inside of me as a younger person, and I needed something to help put it into like into a recognizable form, so I didn't feel so alone and so weak. And so I always use writing and songwriting and playwriting as a way of ordering my thoughts and ordering my emotions so that I can sort of move forward. And for me, I like plays and musicals and theater and art that illuminates. I'm not totally against ambiguity. And I think that ambiguity can be a tool, but I sort of prefer ambiguity that helps pose a question rather than just sort of leave things vague. If an ending of something is ambiguous and I lead that with like questions that are for me to sort of wrestle with as an audience member, I love that. But if I leave feeling like it's just ambiguity for the sake of fucking with the audience and not sort of really sort of bringing clarity in storytelling, I'm less interested in that kind of thing. So on that note, I want to share a final song that, you know, if you saw Strange Loop, then you know that I'm like very influenced and was influenced by the artist Liz Phair. She's somebody who I think is a really incredible example of really clear-eyed telling of the truth, even if it paints herself in a bad light, and of like being able to take other points of view and sort of bounce them off of each other and embrace sort of the difficulties of life in her songwriting. And so she's someone who I very much have drawn from in my writing. And I just want to share this final song that is one of hers that I love from her first album, Exile in Guyville. And it's called Stratford on Guy. And I'm probably gonna sing along because I love it. Oh, I can't sing along because I can't hear it.
I was flying into Chicago at night, watching the lake turn the sky into blue-green smoke. The sun was setting to the left of the plane, and the cabin was filled with an unearthly glow. In 2070, I was behind the wing, watching landscape roll out like credits on a screen. The earth looked like it was lit from within, like a poorly assembled electrical ball as we moved out of the farmlands into the grid. The plan of a city was all that you saw, and all of these people sitting totally still as the ground raced beneath them 30,000 feet down. It took an hour, maybe a day, but once I really listened, the noise just went away. And I was pretending that I was in a Galaxy 500 video. The stewardess came back and checked on my drink. In the last drink of sunlight, a Bridget Bardot. There's a hat on my headphones, along with those eyes that you get when your circumstance is moving sides. It took an hour, maybe a day, but once I really listened, the noise just fell away. It took an hour, maybe a day, but once I really listened, the noise just fell away. But once I really listened, the noise just fell away.
And that was the delightful Stratford on Guy. Once I really listened, the noise just fell away. So good. And that's pretty much concludes my stream of consciousness yammering on. I think we're gonna bring on Carl and Ashley, and we're gonna do some light troubleshooting as I cannot hear anything.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Michael, even though you can't hear me. So yeah, Michael's right. We're gonna just take a couple moments to see if we can remedy this sound glitch that we've got. So thanks for your patience. We are lifting the veil into process in all the ways. So fingers crossed we can make this happen. Okay, cool.
Okay,
Ashley, take it away.
sweet. So I'm going to kick it off with a question from Jackie in Zoom, which is going off your approach to procrastination. I'd love to know your thoughts on toxic productivity during this time, and how do you navigate the pressure to quote unquote use your time effectively to create, and what does that mean to you?
I think productivity is bullshit. We're in a moment of pause. We're in a moment of like deep reflection, and some people's response to that is to create. And if that's what your response is, then you should create. But if your response is to sleep all day, which has been, especially in the early part of this, was like a big part of, for me, like that's like I had to just sleep and like eat and like just get through the day. I didn't feel like it was my that like I needed to make something, because part of my making something is living, and like this is an unprecedented event in my lifetime, and so I needed to sort of live it a bit, and I feel like being a little bit further into it, I'm feeling the creative juices begin to come now. So I feel like everybody should like just get very real with themselves about what their bodies are telling them. Really listen to what your body is saying. If your body is saying create, then create. But I would say, even if you're in that zone, don't worry about whether it's like good or not. I got a little micro commission to write something. And I did it, and I didn't worry about whether it was good or not, because to me, all of that is subjective in this particular moment. So but again, if your impulse, if your body is saying sleep, rest, hibernate, whatever, you should really follow that and you'll come out of it eventually. You know, trying to like go against what your body is telling you right now, I think is gonna not yield anything positive. So down with like this assumption of productivity.
Cool, thank you. Okay, question from Zoom, from Megan Nelson. How has bell hooks influenced your writing? Are there any specific texts that come to mind?
So I have mostly encountered Belle's work through her talks that she's done online over the last like 8 or so years. And so listening to those talks have led me to some of her written works, which I actually frankly need to read more of, but like just listening to her speak about the imagination as a space for liberty has been really useful to me, because I think that, especially as a Black writer, there's a lot of sort of, there are some assumptions around the work that I do that I'm gonna be like, that my role as a Black writer is to sort of like address like Black oppression, as opposed to Black joy or Black imagination or Black complexity or Black, all the other things that like exist within our being. And so I really look to Belle as someone who, like in her critique of something like 12 Years a Slave, which was a movie that I really enjoyed, but I listened to her talk about it, and she talked about how if she never watched a Black woman be raped and abused in a film, that she would be happy for the rest of her life. And I feel like taking a critique like that to heart and going, oh, what would it mean to create a film that doesn't rely on the sort of degradation of Black bodies in order to, like, quote unquote, tell the truth? That there might be other truths to be mined in depicting something really silly or something really, abstract or whatever. I mean, which, again, I'm not saying never depict a Black woman being abused in slavery in order to talk about slavery, but to even contend with the idea that one might never, that there are eyes out there in the world that never want to see a Black woman being abused in slavery, is, and that it's an honorable impulse to say, in my work or in your work or in Belle's work or whomever, that I'm not going to do that, that I'm going to actually carve out another space for Blackness to exist, not in destruction. That specific point really fed into A Strange Loop, because for me, it felt very moving to show this Black queer man go through various, traumatizing situations, but come out of it on the other side to realize that nothing was really wrong with him, which is the thing that sort of put him in harm's way for most of the piece. And like, for him to realize that and to sort of have the sense that, oh, after this musical is over, the world is not going to conform to his wishes, but that he's not going to necessarily go forward in the world thinking that he was a problem. So, and I think Belle's work is somebody who can really help illuminate a truth like that.
Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. We have a couple of questions about audience from YouTube. Aaron is wondering, what are your thoughts on audience, writing for a specific audience, writing what some person might need to hear, people who are not that, etc. And relatedly, Ezra is wondering, how do you balance staying true to the personal elements of your work while also making it engaging / interesting for a wider audience?
So the only way I can really respond to that is to say that I'm not only a writer of theater, I'm also a consumer of it. So like when I'm writing for myself as an audience member. Like, I'm someone who for many years went to see the theater. Like, one of the first theaters I came to in New York City was at Playwrights Horizons. And I've seen many plays and musicals over the years, and I've hated a lot of it. You know what I mean? And so like, from that, I began writing, because I either didn't see myself on stage, not just in terms of a Black body on stage, but even just a point of view. I never saw my points of view reflected on stage. I never saw my contradictions reflected on stage. And that's why I began writing. And so when I write, even though I'm writing for myself as somebody who thinks of himself as like an actual universal human being who's no less human than someone else next to me who might have a totally different Black background. So I don't necessarily really think about writing for specific audiences, because I'm writing for myself, and myself contains multitudes. So like, that was one reason why when I found out that A Strange Loop is going to be produced, at first I thought, oh, this is gonna be the Blackest, gayest, queerest, whatever, like, musical of all time, and I'm gonna teach them, I'm gonna show them, because they don't put us on stage like this, blah, blah, blah. But the closer it got to actually doing the production, I was like, wait, there's a really an incredible opportunity here for me to share that this story was in fact did have universal truths within this marginalized Black body and point of view. And that, for me, one of the greatest compliments that I got throughout the run was that people who weren't Black, who weren't queer, would come up to me and say, I'm not Black, I'm not queer, and yet I have a strange loop inside of me. And this piece resonated with me. And then to also hear people who were like, I'm Black, I'm fat, I'm queer, I'm gay, or whatever, and this was my story. And that you could come to that piece and you could have, depending on who you were, you could have a range of experiences, emotions, feelings. It would test your empathy in different ways and the same ways. And that for me is the kind of art that I want to make. I'm not trying to like waste anybody's time. Like, I want everyone who comes to see my work to feel like they can find something in it without sacrificing my own integrity and my centrality as a Black writer, which is an identity that I wear very proudly.
So you were just speaking so beautifully about writing about yourself and for yourself. And just as a follow-up question, someone from Zoom was wondering, how do you, if you do, distinguish between the private and the personal? Like, how do you know when your story becomes too insular, too self-referential, or is that ever something to be concerned with?
Well, I guess in the process of writing A Strange Loop, there were drafts where I used like real names of people from my life. And I actually, and like the more and more I work on these drafts, I was like, this piece isn't about like evening the score with any particular person in my life. This is a story about a Black gay man's perception of himself. And so that already creates a sort of a distance in it. And that's another reason why I don't describe the piece as autobiographical. And so I feel like the difference between private and personal is that like private things are like autobiographical elements that are like, I have a mother whose name is Mary, and so therefore I'm going to put a character named Mary in my musical. Whereas personal is like, I think wearing masks are bullshit, and I'm going to have a character say that, even though that's an unpopular opinion to have within one's feelings and thoughts. And so that personal thing, I think, is more interesting than me putting my mother in a musical in order to excoriate her about something in my own life. And so that's why, like, at a certain point, I was like, these characters aren't my parents. These are perceptions of my parents, and therefore of Usher's parents. And when I realized that, I can go even further with them in telling this story than if I were to just say, oh, this is all about me, and ooh, look at me.
I have a question from Zoom, from Jordan. If you have any experience with imposter syndrome, how do you deal with overcoming that and putting your art out into the universe?
I don't know that I necessarily deal with imposter syndrome at this point, because I just had so many years as a Black gay man in the world who had like a low self-esteem, and then as an artist who I went to art in order to deal with the low self-esteem, and like A Strange Loop came out of that. And then A Strange Loop helped me recognize that nothing was wrong with me and that I wasn't like an inferior being in any way. And then that helped me realize that I was a good writer and that I deserved to be heard, and that I didn't have to, like I had said earlier, I didn't have to approach getting my professional debut at a major New York theater from a place of either scarcity or from defensiveness, that like I could engage with that theater from a place of mutual respect, that like I respect them for producing my work, and they respect me as an artist, and that together we're all on the same team to create something for an audience that's also invited in as a place of mutual respect. And so for me, once I was able to get to that place, there was no room for me to quote unquote be an imposter. I am the real thing. I am a good writer. I'm a Black writer. I wear all of those identities together, and I think anybody can do that for themselves, but you have to take the defensiveness out of it, and you have to like identify what your goals are and what your sort of dreams and desires and frailties and humanity is, and like, and honor it, and let the world know that you are honoring it, and like, and you know, that in the Pollyanna in me, and then they'll see it too, you know, but also like, fuck them if they don't see it, still do it, even if they don't see it. That's for me is what takes the imposter syndrome away.
Awesome.
You might have just answered this with like in the most beautiful way possible, but Teresa from Zoom is wondering, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your 24-year-old self?
Ooh, so many things. I mean, so many things. I mean, I would have encouraged him to explore his sexuality from less of a place of fear. But I also would have encouraged him to, in that exploration, to establish clear boundaries and not feel ashamed of those boundaries, to not be afraid of his sexuality and not be afraid of his boundaries, and that both the exploration and the boundaries can live together in harmony. I also would have encouraged him to be more thoughtful about money, and especially as like an aspiring artist, to realize that he could, you know, pursue his dreams of being a writer without having to go into like debt. That there were other ways, that there's a way to live that bohemian, to like actually choose living the bohemian lifestyle and like figure out how to support it, and not like buy into this sort of capitalist fantasy of like you got to spend money to make money, you know, like there's some truth to that, but it's not the whole truth. So I would have really encouraged my younger self to be smarter about that.
Another question from Zoom. What do you find are the biggest differences between playwriting, lyric writing, book writing, you know, music? Is your process for each of these disciplines basically the same, or how do you approach each element here of your work?
So for me, so I don't have a I don't have a composition background. Like I didn't go to school for composition. I'm not a particularly great pianist. I mean, I did play piano for many years in middle school and high school. I played in churches, and so a lot of my compositional style very much comes out of an improvisational style, because that's what I did playing in churches all the time, and I have a really good musical ear, and so it was a combination of those two things. And then I didn't know how to write lyrics when I was growing up, although I wanted to write songs because I wanted to basically be Tori Amos as a teenager, and I mimicked her, and like a lot of my early songwriting, it was all me trying to imitate Tori Amos, but I didn't understand lyric writing. So then like I went to playwriting school, and then I learned how to basics, the ins and outs of like playwriting, and then I went to musical theater writing for grad school, and I learned about lyric writing. And so I learned about each of these things in very different ways. So like the music was like a sort of unstudied or somewhat unstudied venture. Playwriting was like studied, but within a department that wasn't really interested in my voice. And then I learned about lyric writing and subsequently book writing as an extension of the playwriting in a program that was very much encouraging me to was very much nurturing my voice. And then as a result of that, the music that I had, which came from a very elemental place in me as a younger person, it all informed it, like it had somewhere to go in the lyrics. And so then what ended up happening in the evolution of A Strange Loop was that suddenly these three different parts of my skill sets were able to come together organically to through my point of view, which is another thing that I was sort of had become in touch with and continue to become in touch with. So I view, so like the result of that was that I'm a composer. I approach composition like a playwright who writes lyrics, and I approach lyrics like a book writer. You know what I mean? And so like, for me, the story is always the like number one thing, and everything has to support that. And so I'm constantly asking myself questions, even in my like total lack of comprehensive training, like what am I trying to say here? What is the like the tone and the style? How do those things come together to communicate to the audience what I mean and what I'm trying to express? I'm always trying to figure out how to bridge the gap between what's happening on stage and what's happening in the audience. I think the audience is an incredibly important collaborator, and so my writing process is all about collaborating with the audience.
Ashley, did you have one?
Yeah. So we've got a couple of people who are wondering about rewriting / like when do you know that the show is done? So yeah, like when do you know it's time to stop rewriting, and like when do you know that the show is finalized, and maybe in particular when did you know, or how did you know A Strange Loop was finished?
So the answer to all of those is that A Strange Loop is not finished and the rewriting never ends. Basically, I mean, I always say also that like I'm not a good writer, I'm a good rewriter. Because the minute I hear it out loud for that first time or in a cold read or whatever, my ear is suddenly on like, oh, I can tighten it up just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And I was very fortunate with the sort of trajectory of A Strange Loop to have many, many years working with my director, Stephen Brackett, and with a lot of the cast members on constantly hearing the piece again and making more and more and more improvements. And like those improvements, again, just came from the self-inquiry that I talked about during my talk of like, am I saying what I mean? And do I mean what I say? Like is every line truly communicating that like that electric, like you plug the plug into the socket and it's like you're cooking with gas, you know? And so like I'm for me that work is kind of never done. And even though I think we got to like a really strong, super strong place in the production, there were things that we just like didn't have time to deal with in previews that like I'm still working on. They're not necessarily major overhauls. I'm not writing any new songs. I'm not necessarily cutting any songs or anything like that. But there's just like little places where I can tighten and fix and clarify, because there were moments that I heard during, like there's one moment, I'm not gonna say what it is, but like there's a moment during the show that gets a big laugh and it's like a really funny moment, but I can tell that the laugh is coming because the actor really sold it. Mm-hmm. They're not laughing because the joke is clear. And so one of my, goals in my rewrites for further iterations of the show is to make the joke clear so that it's not just about the actor selling it. And it's a small thing. It won't mean much to maybe most people, but it's things like that, plus like a bigger, like a somewhat bigger gesture with the ending, which was always something that I struggled with from the very beginning of realizing that the ending was that as a gesture, the ending was what it was, but there's still a thing about it that I need to clarify for myself that I think will make it even more meaningful for the audience. And that's something that, like, I guess I would ask people to think about, is that there are moments in shows that are powerful, but they're not meaningful. And I would say to any writer to like ask yourself to parse out the difference between those two things. I'm interested in things being meaningful. I feel like when you come to a show, you should be able to come away from it with some sense of what it's about, and be able to, even if you have questions, still be able to like take a message away from it. And so there's aspects of the show right now that I still am working on, just underlining the meaning while maintaining the power, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just have time for one more question. So this is from Kimberly. If or whenever you felt on the verge of burnout/fatigue, how do you re-engage with your craft or practice?
I procrastinate.
How's that for a strange loop?
That's right. I mean, it's just like sometimes if I'm burnt out, that means I need to stop. And I need to do something else until I have the energy to come back to it. And it means I need to recharge. And that's another reason why I'm like sort of anti this idea of productivity. Because like, what are you being why productivity? We don't have any deadlines. Nobody's in rehearsal. No one's like, we're all in our houses, or, you know, doing whatever we're doing during this quarantine period. So like, why not use that time to like absorb what's happening in your life and to see what's going on in your body? And that's a big, I didn't talk so much about that during the talk, but like the body is like such an important part of what we do as writers. Like, and I think that our plays and our musicals and our songs and so forth should be like, our body should be in those things. Like, they're not separate. Real life is not separate from theater. It's all reflecting back on each other, on itself. And so if you don't like it, burnout, like let yourself burn out and then do something else. Have some whiskey. Or if you're sober, like don't have some whiskey and like, I don't know, exercise or call your sponsor or whatever, you know, but like find the thing that's going to help you recharge and allow yourself to have the time. Playwright, something that Michael Walkup, who's the artistic director of Page 73, often said when I was in the I-73 group, the writers group there, playwrights don't get vacations. We don't get paid time off. So like, if there's a time when like you actually get to like kind of relax, you should seize it. Relax, sleep, recharge, find yourself again. Figure out what's going on with yourself, what's going on in your body. And I think once you take the time to do that, your playwriting or your songwriting or whatever is going to be recharged by you taking that time. So take it. Don't take it for granted, because it's not.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if I don't know like if any of this seemed weird, like with my not being able to hear, if it seemed like I was crazy, but forgive me, anybody out there, if I seemed like weird because I couldn't hear what was happening on the other end for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think it was totally okay. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for rolling with the punches and being such a pro.
All right, anytime.
So before
and everybody be well and be safe. And like,
yes.
Even though I don't like wearing a mask, and I think they're bullshit, wear them and do what they tell us, but just think about what that means and why we're doing that while not rent striking. We should be rent striking and we're not. And we should think about why we're not, but we will wear our masks. That's a contradiction. I actually want people to really think about that.
Thank you. Okay, so before we say goodnight, we're just gonna highlight a couple more things. So we have one more masterclass scheduled as of this moment. It's 2 weeks from tonight on Monday, June 1st. That will be with Larissa Fasthorse. So if you haven't signed up yet, you can go to phnyc.org/pop. Another thing I wanted to mention, and Michael, maybe you can help me clarify details, but there's an event happening tomorrow night.
Oh yes,
Musical Theater Factory.
Musical Theater Factory, who is a major. They're like the main reason why anybody knows about A Strange Loop. That's where it got its real proper beginning. We're gonna do a rebroadcast of a concert that I did last year, that was leading up to the production at Playwrights Horizons with Page 73, of a concert I called the Michael R. Jackson 37th Annual Talk and Sing. And it starts at 7 o'clock on YouTube. I'm gonna be on MTF's Instagram account doing a little chat with some cast members, and Shakina Nathak, who is the artistic founder of MTF, talking about some things and leading up to watching the broadcast, and then jumping on to YouTube to sort of live blog the concert from last year. So if you're so inclined, please come check out MTF's Musical Theater Factory's Instagram page tomorrow around 6:45, and then join us to watch the rebroadcast of the concert, which has some songs from A Strange Loop and some standalone songs that I've written over the years that I did in the concert at Joe's Pub last year.
I think it starts at 8, but
oh, so I'm telling you the wrong time.
No, it's
so,
okay. I put the link to the Facebook event in the chat. And better to be early than late, right? So you went the right way. Oh, great. The other quick thing, okay. I think that's it for now. That's it for me. Ashley.
Cool. And yeah, so the last thing is just, if you're at all inclined to support Playwrights Horizons and the POP program, we'd be so grateful. You can visit phnyc.org/donate, or even just text POP-PH to 44321. We're going to post that info in the chat here as well. And additionally, if you want to share any reflection or insight about your experience tonight, we'd love to hear from you. You can write to Carl and I both at pop@phnyc.org. And so we hope you and your loved ones are continuing to take care and staying safe. And we just are really looking forward to all being together again whenever theaters can reopen. But thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And thank you again, Michael.
And thank you, Michael.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to do this. And I truly hope that people took some value from it. If you want to yell at me, I'm all over social media. I'm on Twitter at @thelivingmj. I'm on Instagram at @thelivingmichaeljackson. My website is thelivingmichaeljackson.com. I'm on Facebook. DM me, write me, send me death threats. I mean, don't send me death threats.
Yeah, no.
But like, if you want to date me after the pandemic is over, slip into my DMs. I'm open to literally all those things. Death, sex. I want the full range of human experience at this point. So please, gentlemen, seek me out.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
So much.
And ladies too.
The full range.
Good night, everybody.
Cool.
Thank you. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.